live from Daytona, and Buddy Baker, the leader of the race, has just crashed as we are starting to do our opening here. This is Jim McKay with Jackie Stewart. Buddy Baker had taken the lead a few laps ago. They're racing under the green flag, but now the yellow is out as the leader has crashed about 10 seconds after we came on the air.
He stalled his engine, Jim, as he spun right off the track there. The engine refired, and he's got the car back onto the racetrack. He's going to try and get back to the pits.
And someone else appears to have been involved, and that's Dave Marcus in car number 2. Earlier in the race, he had to retire, go into the garage area, and they completely changed an engine, which put him some 50 laps behind. He was in last place in the race in the Roger Penske prepared car. Let's take a slow motion look, Jackie, at what happened just as we came on the air. Baker is the second one in your picture. Marcus just in front of him.
Yes, they were just touched each other. It seemed that Marcus's car was hitting the rear end by
There's
Baker.
Cale Yarborough.
The two cars came in contact. Cale Yarborough got through. Then, of course, the second car on your screen there, the back end of your screen, spun round. That's Buddy Baker. Now he's off the hard surface. He's onto the grass, spinning round. Other cars locked up in their brakes. Nobody else hitting the wall, but both of those cars came into contact fairly heavily at a speed I would estimate of around about 180 miles an hour. Now Buddy Baker is coming round the racetrack, coming in towards the pits.
All right, we're still racing under the yellow now after that incident, the net result of which is that David Pearson, last year's winner, is leading the race, but now he has just come into the pits under the yellow. The standings are very, very scrambled at the moment. As we were saying, this ABC Sports exclusive is brought to you by Goodyear, makers of the American Eagle Radial, a new kind of tire built for the American road. By Light Beer, everything you always wanted in a beer and less. And by Gabriel Shock Absorbers, the shocks tested by 4 of the most respected names in auto racing, people who know shocks. Go Gabriel. Now, the smoke you saw just a moment ago while we were doing our opening here has nothing to do with the race. It's a huge brush fire that's been burning behind turn 3 for the last hour and a half. It is in no way a threat to the race. Now, there's Buddy Baker in the pits after this incident.
Well, Buddy Baker's car, what an extraordinary accident to happen there, coming off of turn 2. There's a very high wind, but wait a minute, Chris Economaki is down in the pits, and he's trying to get this story.
Okay, we're David Marcus's pit. Here's his car. It looked like they're going to try to get it back in the race, and now they're pushing it back. The Penske crew is working here. He was involved with the Buddy Baker crash. Earlier, Marcus's crew changed an engine in 50 minutes. The problem here today, the big problem is the wind. A crowd of 125,000. Paper napkins, hot dog wrappers blowing out of the infield and onto the track has caused many cars to overheat, and it caused Marcus to change his engine. Back to you, Jim.
When Chris says that the wind caused cars to overheat, of course he's talking about the fact that there are many hot dog wrappers, pieces of plastic blowing around the track, and they blow into the radiator, don't they, Jack?
That's correct, and of course they stop the airflow to the radiator.
Here are the current standings, with people still continuing to pit under the yellow. Benny Parsons, who won this race 2 years ago, is the leader. Buddy Baker still second now. David Pearson third after his pit stop. Cale Yarborough fourth, and Darrell Waltrip fifth. I'm going to tell you, we're going to have some time here for the next hour and a half. A long way to go in the Daytona 500. The picture you're watching is live. The event is the Daytona 500. Watching it live with us here, the largest sporting crowd of the year on the eastern seaboard. Well over 100,000 people, a record crowd for Daytona. This is the 19th running of the race, and you see by those papers blowing around that it's a very windy day. It's clear overhead, it's warm, temperature in the mid-70s. That wind is a factor. First of all, the papers blowing around, and secondly, one part of the race course can particularly, would you say, Jackie, turn 2 is the most bothersome place with the wind?
When the cars come out of turn 2, there is a very exposed area. They've been coming out on the high bank, 31 degrees of banking, which is very steep. The cars have been glued to the road surface. They come onto the level road again, and when you get a gust of wind at the sort of speeds we're doing just now, gusting up to 25 to 30 miles an hour, it's very easy to make a car unstable. And the accident that we just saw a few moments ago there with the leader, Buddy Baker, could easily have been caused by that wind. One never knows, but the wind is certainly stronger than I've ever seen it here at Daytona.
Okay, well, the yellow flag is going to be out for another couple of minutes, I believe, because we have a car stall, which you may have seen there, up in turn 3, and that's Salt Walter. He stalled up against the wall. which has happened since the yellow flag came out. So why don't we take a look backwards to the year 1975, when this man, Benny Parsons, currently leading this race, also turned out to be the winner of the Daytona 500. It didn't look like it with just a little while yet to go. Keith and Jackie were here.
Unpredictable can always occur in motor racing. And just, you don't know the moment until that checkered flag comes out. So don't go away, because my goodness, it can still happen. Hopefully it's not going to happen that way for David Pearson, because I think a lot of people would like to see him put this one in the bag, because he's never won it before. You can see there David Pearson in car number 21. He really did a conservative move there, because he hasn't even been using all of the racetrack. He comes up behind Cale Yarborough, and he does get through there. But my goodness, he didn't squeeze his way through, and my goodness, he's lost it. He's come right off.
There's that old thing of racing luck with 3 laps to go. David Pearson broke loose on the racetrack, and he has come to a stop that puts Benny Parsons in the lead. What a dramatic moment it was. And David Pearson was sailing along, working his way through the traffic, and suddenly his car broke loose, and let's have another look at it. I didn't see any reason for it, but here we see him beginning to make his move through the slower traffic, and just all of a sudden, the car broke loose. Now, maybe something blew. I don't know. Maybe he blew a tire. Maybe his engine blew and dumped some oil on it. He was able to keep it out of trouble. Nobody went out with him, but David Pearson, heading along with only 3 laps to go, suddenly is dead on the side of the racetrack. The white flag is out for Benny Parsons. What a day this is going to be for Benny. Came out of Detroit, moved down to Ellerby, North Carolina. He suffered. He has really paid the price and worked his way up through the ranks to become a Grand National stock car racing driver. He was the 1973 Grand National points champion, and here he is, suddenly with Lady Luck, Lady Fate, call her what you want, sitting in the cockpit with him, and here he comes around to take a checkered flag that I'll guarantee you he'll covet forever.
That was 2 years ago. Earlier this weekend, Chris Economaki talked to Benny Parsons about that experience. He had a very interesting and moving answer.
Benny, think back to 1975 on the backstretch with the checkered flag almost in sight. Pearson coming alongside and you winding up winners. What kind of thoughts do you have about that today?
Well, that's very hard to talk about that, Chris, because it was the highlight of my racing life, my racing career, and I've been doing it for a long, long time, and I guess there's been times during this period that I said, well, did I pick the right profession? Am I truly a race car driver? Do I deserve to be? But you have days like that, pulling Victory Circle at Daytona Beach and the Daytona 500. You know that you made the right decision a long, long time ago.
So Benny Parsons proved to himself 2 years ago on this racetrack and in this race that he was, in fact, a race driver. And he still is, because in that car number 72, he is right now, as you watch live, the leader in the 1977 Daytona 500. In second place right now is Buddy Baker. In third place, Cale Yarborough. In fourth place, David Pearson, the man whom Benny Parsons beat out in that dramatic finish 2 years ago. And in fifth place, Darrell Waltrip in car number 88. Benny Parsons has won the race before. Buddy Baker never has. Cale Yarborough won it 9 years ago, and David Pearson won it for the first time last year. We'll be back for the green. The flag man has given them the signal that the next time they come to the start-finish line, they will get the green flag, and they'll be racing again at Daytona. 128 laps have gone by as Buddy Baker, who was in second place, who was in first place, was in third place, now has come into the pits again under the yellow. I don't know whether he can get out again in time. He'll certainly have lost space on the racetrack. They're in the middle of the backstretch right now. They will get the green flag. As I said, 128 laps have gone by. 72 laps remain in the race. All of the decisions are yet to be made. That's Buddy Baker in the pits, and it looks like he might have a bigger problem than expected. On the race course, now we got news in the pits from Chris Economaki.
We have a remarkable story here in David Pearson's pit. The man who won the race last year is in a unique position. His car by itself is 20/100ths of a second a lap slower than anybody else in the race. So in order for him to stay in the hunt, he has to stay on someone's back bumper. He cannot lead. Back to you, Jim.
Okay, in other words, David Pearson must draft in order to stay with him and try to win the race, and that's what he's doing. They should be getting the green, and the flag man waves the green. They're racing as the pace car comes off the track. And Benny Parsons, the leader, in car number 72, a couple of slower cars flanking him there. Parsons is the one Well, here he's coming right at him. It appears to be the second car.
Yes, he's right behind A.J. Foyt. He's going below A.J. Foyt. A.J. Foyt is not on the same lap. Benny Parsons, the red, white, blue car, low on the banking, is getting under A.J. Foyt, getting into position to be first onto the back straight. This 3,000-foot back straight at Daytona. A long way down there, but Benny Parsons in the lead, is on the lead on the racetrack too.
Okay, the car that's in second place appears to be fourth. Number 11, Cale Yarborough. And there is A.J. Foyt just in front of Benny Parsons. A.J. Foyt, remember, is a lap down, but has now unlapped himself. He's on the same lap, but he's almost a complete lap behind. Benny Parsons, the second car, is the leader in the race. The fourth car, Cale Yarborough, is the second car in the race, as far as the standings are concerned. At this moment, David Pearson is third, Buddy Baker fourth. Well, even the seagulls are blowing around here today. Look at that. Sensational racing under very difficult conditions. The wind, again, is blowing at 20 to 22 miles per hour officially, with gusts up to 35. And even with these heavy machines, that is something.
It is, because these machines do move around. Aerodynamically, of course, it's a big car to be caught by the wind, particularly on a side gust of wind. And, of course, this can really alter the positioning of a car. And when you're driving at these sort of speeds, remember they're qualifying at speeds of 187 miles an hour. Anything can happen.
A.J. Foyt has been put in a lap situation yet again. Right now, however, we have Darrell Waltrip trying to unlap himself from the leader.
And he's succeeded in doing it. He's got in front of Benny Parsons. Benny Parsons lifted off a little bit there and let Darrell Waltrip through. There was no point in causing an accident as they were going through there. It was a much better deal in turn 1 and 2 to just let him drift through, because if Benny Parsons wants to get past him again, he can draft him. And here's A.J. Foyt.
Unlapping himself, right?
With Cale Yarborough staying in behind A.J., trying to get the draft going underneath Darrell Waltrip. And look how close they are there. The red-orange car, Cale Yarborough.
And what this means is that Cale Yarborough has now taken the lead. He did it by drafting on a car that's almost a lap behind to pass number 72, Benny Parsons. It's a little confusing, but we'll try to keep it as specific as we can for you, because among those 4 lead cars, 2 of them are the leaders. The other 2, from one moment to the next, are either on another lap or back on the same lap.
It's very difficult and very complicated after there's been a yellow. So therefore it's difficult just to keep an eye on everything as they go around there, but you're going around there in beautiful formation.
On the backstretch now, Cale Yarborough is the leader in the race. 9 years ago he won it. That's been a long time. A.J. Foyt there in car number 51, remember, is a lap and 10 feet behind. And that's the brush fire you saw again, burning about a mile away. There is Janet Guthrie, who is in 23rd position in the race. Janet started 39th, way back in the 20th row, and mostly due to attrition of other cars has moved up to 23rd. She's been in the pits quite a bit herself, but the main thing is that the first woman ever to be in the Daytona 500 is still running.
Been a lot of pressure on Janet Guthrie over here, a lot of publicity and so forth, but she's standing up to it very well. There you see the current standings: Cale Yarborough in first position, Benny Parsons, David Pearson, Buddy Baker, and Darrell Waltrip. All very talented drivers, all drivers who are more than capable of winning this race.
There again is the leader, Cale Yarborough, William Caleb Yarborough, Timmonsville, South Carolina. He's a very busy man. He's a lot of interest off the race course, automotive and otherwise. He's in politics, was a very early supporter of now President Jimmy Carter of the United States. In fact, one of the stock car racing fans here today, by the way, is Billy Carter, the first brother, as some people call him these days. Billy is here, and may find out later who he's rooting for.
Well, it's good to see Cale up there. After all, he is the national champion, so therefore he's in his rightful place, if you like, but he's got a few contenders there that are going to be on his heels.
Among others at the race today, by the way, if you want to know how far stock car racing has come, is the Iranian ambassador, the Greek ambassador, and several other ambassadors from foreign countries. It's really a major, major event here.
The Egyptian ambassador earlier on, Jim, was suggesting that we have a racetrack round the pyramids. That really would be a high banked oval.
You saw that brush fire again as they went by. Apparently it isn't endangering anything. It's about a mile from the racetrack, we are told. It is close to the Daytona Beach Airport, but not endangering it either. It also appears to be about a half mile from the Goodyear blimp. And that's an interesting point. The Goodyear blimp would have had its usual marvelous pictures for us today from our camera position up there, but it was grounded because of the high winds. So also was our camera on a crane coming out of turn 2. So it's very, very windy here. Let's take a relationship shot from car number 21. This is David Pearson. How far behind leader Cale Yarborough is he? Well, we'll see when we begin to pan across here. Okay, from David Pearson, moving across to the lead car, number 11 of Cale Yarborough. So as you can see, David is not very far behind, and obviously neither is car number 72, Benny Parsons, in second place.
It's going to be difficult for David Pearson. I'm not sure that David Pearson isn't coming down low on the banking here, but it's going to be difficult for him to catch up on Cale Yarborough. Cale Yarborough seems to find it very easy indeed to stay out in front. He must have a car that's very well suited aerodynamic. But he is coming into the pits. David Pearson.
Car number 21 coming in to the most skilled pit crew in the world, probably the Wood brothers. Glenn and Leonard and Delano and all the others. They've got that hood up. That means a problem immediately. Can you tell anything, Jackie?
No, I'm busy trying to look. They're doing all the scheduling as well, but I'm afraid they're looking a little bit long in there. I don't think they're very happy at all. It's a very dejected-looking crew. That was rather a slow close of the hood or the bonnet or whatever we call it. There's the picture of David Pearson.
We call it the hood.
The man in the corner is David Pearson. Not a smile on his face right now, I'm willing to bet, because I think the day may be over for David Pearson and the Wood brothers.
Okay, so last year's winner may have had it for the day. Certainly he is losing invaluable seconds because this is all under the green flag. The leader then, Cale Yarborough. Second place, Benny Parsons. Third, Buddy Baker. Fourth, Darrell Waltrip. We'll be back at Daytona live.
Well, the man who was trying to win 2 straight, David Pearson, walking around now. What was it that put you out, David?
Well, Chris, I guess it was a valve. I know that when the Chevrolets and all them got together up there, you know, I was having to run wide open, trying to just hang on, and I was about to lose a draft, and I just run about, I guess, 8 or 10 laps ever since that last caution, wide open without even breathing. And of course, I guess that's what caused you to run.
What about the wind, David, and all that litter on the track? What's it do to you?
Well, it's not really too bad. Every once in a while, it would come up and make the car push going into number 2. I mean, coming off of number 2. And I would almost hit the wall 2 or 3 times. And, of course, shifted one time and got a little loose coming off 4.
Okay, thanks, David. Back to you, Jim.
All right, Chris. Only 3 cars are on the same lap now. These are the official standings. Number 11, Cale Yarborough. Number 72, Benny Parsons. And number 15, Buddy Baker. That is Cale Yarborough in the front of that pack there. In second position is A.J. Poit, but he's a lap behind. In third apparent position is Benny Parsons. He's in second place in the race. So that's the way it stands, and they're kind of sitting that way, but shouldn't last too long here.
Well, 1 or 2 of the top drivers are out of this race. Richard Petty has dropped out of the race with an engine problem, and the fact that David Pearson has also dropped out of the race must surely be helping the hopes of Cale Yarborough, of Buddy Baker, who, by the way, has never won this Speedway, has never won this race, and to know that these 2 great drivers are out of the race is a great help to him, because although there's still stiff opposition up there, it's better to have these 2 on the sidelines.
As far as the rest of the drivers are concerned, that is certainly true. You see a part of the tremendous crowd they have here today, well over 100,000 people. Cale Yarborough, boy, he's had quite a career. He won this race 9 years ago. He was the NASCAR driving champion last season. Chris Economaki talked to him about that distinction before the race today.
Cale, you had a season last year that was one of work, and you won the championship. I know you're going after the championship again. How many seasons can a driver take like that?
Well, I don't really know, Chris. It's tough. It's tough running 30 races on the Grand National Series all year, but it's really worth it. Being the Grand National Champion has always been, something that I've had in the back of my mind since I started racing, and now I am Grand National Champion, and it's even better than I thought it was, so I'd like to stay that way.
Cale Yarborough, at age 37, the NASCAR champion. He started in this sport back in 1957, 20 years ago, when he was 17 years old. And as they were indicating, that's a lot of race driving.
That's a lot of time for anyone to be in competition. I myself was only in competition for 13 years, Jim, and I found those years, particularly the last 8 or 9 years when I was so called towards the top of the tree, a great deal of pressure. The traveling, the work, the responsibilities, just the racing. You know, a man gets tired doing anything, and in a competitive sport such as motor racing, where it's physical and mental, I take my hat off to people like Cale Yarborough because he always keeps a good mood. He's a real gentleman around the racetrack. He's a great ambassador to the sport and a very worthy champion. So I take my hat off. 20 years of anything is tough business.
In other words, there is a cumulative effect on the body and on the nerves and on the mind caused by the number of years you drive. In other words, not so much your age as how long you've been at it.
Yes, I think it's a question of time. You know, I believe that any man gets stale after a while, and it's very difficult to keep yourself up, to keep enthusiasm, to keep the will to win, because when you've won a lot of events, well, just another race is another race. To try and go in there every time to try and win, and when you are a racing driver, that's got to be your number one priority. You've got a family to look after. You've got business interests. More than anything else, your family. And of course, with being on the road so much and with the dangers of motor racing, this is a heavy burden for everyone.
When they're running at speed here today, they've been averaging speeds of around 183 miles an hour unless they're in traffic. The race speed, of course, is much less than that because of the many yellows that we've had so far. 183 miles on this miles per hour on this 2.5-mile oval could only be achieved with that banking that they're getting up onto now. Jackie Stewart, as a matter of fact, went out on that banking yesterday to show us just how steep it is, because it's almost impossible to show it in a two-dimensional medium unless you get out there and do something like taking a Florida orange with you, for example. Here was Jackie's report on the banking.
Jim, as you can see from your start-finish camera, I'm out here at turn 1. I'm standing at the bottom of turn 1, in fact. The bottom of a 31-degree banking. I'm going to try and walk up this banking to try and illustrate how very steep it is. It's a banking that's about 40 feet, in fact, of road surface, but my goodness, is it steep. And when you think that these cars are going to be traveling round here at about 190 miles an hour, it's not surprising there's a few scares here at Daytona. And can you imagine Richard Petty, who's notorious for going round close to the top, is right up here. Well, the only way, and I must tell you I'm slightly out of breath, the only way that these cars stick to the road up here is because of the banking, because of the G-forces pressing the cars against the road surface. Sometimes you see puffs of smoke coming off the cars as they go round here. It's not an engine that's puffing a smoke, it's tires. And what happens is the G's are pushing the suspension to the limit of its travel. The tires are right up into the wheel arches and touching the fenders. And that's what that smoke is, because there's nowhere else for that wheel to go. It's right in its limit. I've got a Florida orange here, and I'm going to lay it down on the racetrack and let you see how quickly this orange is going to catch up speed to get to the bottom. It's a very steep hill. Here goes our Florida orange. We're going to have a Florida bell pick it up. Look at that.
Okay, Jackie's report on the banking. In the race, the green flag is still out. Cale Yarborough is still the leader. And Benny Parsons is still second, with Buddy Baker third. As for Janet Guthrie, she's moved up now to 15th place in the race. Very good for the first woman driver in the 500. With 50 laps to go in the Daytona 500, the first woman driver in the history of this race is giving a good account of herself. This is Janet Guthrie in car number 68. As you see, she's in 14th place with the 20 cars remaining in the race. She started in 39th position, is still running, as we say, well placed. Chris talked to her earlier.
Janet Guthrie, the first woman to qualify for a Daytona 500. Janet, yesterday's practice problems, exactly what were they?
Oh, well, actually, what happened was that we believe we have the handling all fixed up on the Kelly girl. I was so ecstatic about the way it was handling that I got a little too fast just as the tires were going away and sort of broadsided the wall, but nothing serious, and we're in good shape for the start today, I believe.
Was it a hard hit?
Oh, no, it just pushed the fenders in a little bit, sort of sanded down the side of the car. We kept the sign painter busy for a while.
Does that make you a woman driver, Janet?
Oh, Chris, what are you going to cut it out?
How do you feel about starting next to Johnny Rutherford?
Well, I think that if indeed we have the handling problem fixed as we seem to have done so, Johnny and I will certainly be, I'll be in good company with Johnny Rutherford. I'm just really thrilled about that.
The little brush with the wall that you had yesterday, is that made you a little bit leery, perhaps, of going a certain place on the track?
Oh, no, not at all. That was just a simple error on my part. I was so delighted that we had the handling problem fixed on the Kelly girl car that I just went too fast too soon as the tires were going away and broadsided the wall a bit. But I'm really not concerned. The wander is all gone, and as you know, that's how I didn't finish terribly well in the qualifying race. I'm looking forward to it.
Gianna, what about your approach? Are you going to charge, or do you primarily want to finish, or are you going to race? Just how are you going to handle it?
Well, I've always felt it sort of silly to crash a car on the first lap of a 500-mile race, so I imagine I'll use my usual conservative start. But, you know, it depends on how the car actually feels and what the field is doing at the time.
Does the traffic bother you?
No, not if the car is handling right. You know, if you can't put your car where you want it within 12 feet or so, naturally you can't run next to anybody else. But if your car is doing what it ought and it goes where you point it and all that, why then you're glad to run in traffic and try and pick up a draft and all the rest of that.
Gianna, some of the other drivers said that one of their worries when you first came in here was that you weren't physically up to manhandling a 3,700-pound car. How physically exhausting is driving your car?
Well, that's really just nonsense. After all, as Christine Becker said, you don't have to carry it, you just sit in it. And although it is certainly tiring, as anyone here will tell you, it is not beyond the capability of any reasonably fit woman.
As you look at A.J. Foy, who is currently 2 laps down in the race, by the way, although he led earlier and sat in second position on the outside of the first row at the beginning of the race. As you look at him for a moment, we might point out that Johnny Rutherford, the current Indianapolis 500 champion who sat beside Janet Guthrie on the start, has long since retired from the race, and the lady's still out there.
Well, I was very impressed, Jim, as to what Janet Guthrie said right there about the fact that once hitting the wall, she didn't care too much to go back out again. It wasn't as if anything had happened at all, in fact, she thought. I remember when I hit the wall, I had a little brush at the wall at Indianapolis, and I must say that for a simple man, I found myself going back out with some trepidation. I didn't like the idea of going back out. If she can unplug and quickly go back out there and be super competitive, then I'd take my hat off to Janet Guthrie with all the pressure she's had, all the problems, being a lady and having so much attention. Then I think she's a brave girl to be able to throw that out of her mind to just 24 hours ago have hit this wall because of the sort of speed that she travels at. Remember, she's doing over 180 mile an hour, and these walls are made of concrete. It's quite a thrill.
Darrell Waltrip, running in 4th place in the race, has just come into the pits. He's 1 lap behind, but in 4th place in the race. Only 2 cars are on the same lap. Cale Yarborough, the leader, and Benny Parsons, who is in 2nd place. See how quick this one can be. Waltrip, young and very promising race driver.
Well, they're changing the inside rubber of Darrell Waltrip's car. They've already been stopped for 15 seconds. They're still getting it down, and it goes off with about an 18-second stop, filling it up with fuel. Of course, you've got to consider that he's got to leave that pit lane, accelerating as hard as he can, but of course still losing time on these cars that are going round at 180. And there is the man in the lead, Cale Yarborough.
Things almost too settled down here for Daytona at the moment. As we've seen in previous years, it's at such moments that very often the incidents occur and there are sudden changes in the standings. Cale Yarborough looking very, very good at this moment, however. Last year he had the finest season of his career, winning a tremendous amount of money and winning the NASCAR National Championship for the season in a battle that went all the way down to the end of the season. Cale, the father of several children, happily married man of Timminsville, South Carolina. Coming at you out of turn 4 and into the home straight. Now remember, the place where the wind is probably the most bothersome to the drivers is when they're coming out of turn 2. That's because the car is lightened, as Jackie pointed out, and kind of pushes them into the wall.
Yes, you see this car going round here. He's going into turn 1 right now. He's staying around the middle of the road, now letting the car get up closer to the wall, right up to where we were doing our commentary about the banking a few minutes earlier. Very close. Now he's coming off the wall. He's getting in, and just there is when the car starts to go out towards the wall again because of the wind. They talk about the car pushing. When the car pushes, it means it understeers. That's to say they're trying to go left. They turn the steering wheel towards the left, but the car wants to go straight on as if you were on ice. And this is what does happen. Aerodynamics play a big part in these cars, and of course when the wind gets under a car, it tends to lift the wheels just a little bit off the road surface. Not right off the surface, of course, but just depreciates the amount of grip. And of course this wind and this tri-oval, because the corner we're looking at right now underneath our commentary box is the start-finishing line. It's not a straight, it's a dogleg circuit, this, and we've seen a whole lap here.
43 laps left to go. We're reporting live from Daytona. There are the standings of the leaders. You're looking at Cale Yarborough, the leader in the Daytona 500 live, being drafted right now by Darrell Waltrip, who I believe is 2 laps behind in the race right now. He's one of the leaders, but had to make a fairly lengthy pit stop under the green. So Yarborough is the leader. Waltrip 2 laps down, just behind him, and trying to unlap himself on one of those laps. Now, on the 4th lap of this race, we had quite an incident here. Bobby Wawak, a veteran race driver, had a fire, a blazing fire, inside the driver compartment of his car at high speed. This is what it looked like. This is going back. This is the videotape. A.J. Foyt was leading the race. Cale Yarborough just behind him as they were coming out of turn 4. This was the 4th lap, as I said, of the race. And when it happens, our camera will pan back to it rather quickly. And you'll see the car head down towards the infield. Eventually, it hits a concrete wall. But to see this man get out of a race car, first of all, bringing it under control with flames up in front of his face, was a remarkable thing.
What happened was that the engine seemed to blow, the oil came back inside the cockpit and caught fire. Now you see it happening right at the top of the screen. We're going to pan back now to see this. Look at him, he's got out the car. He's jumping out the car, hits the concrete wall head on. By that time he's jumped out. Now he realizes that he's burned his hands. He's looking at his hands. He's trying to pull them away from his body. He now runs towards the hospital, and he did that. In fact, he did not go by ambulance. He ran the whole way. The car, of course, is still burning. But we're going to probably see this again in slow motion as the car came off turn 4. And there's the driver running there with his hands very much apart.
And as of now, the report on him is 2nd degree on both hands, 1st degree on his face and one leg. Here it is again.
Now, here we go down here. You see the car skidding. He's got the brakes on. Look at the flames inside the car. The driver starts to try and get out. He's unloosed the net. He's climbing out the door because the door doesn't open. It's out the window. He's going out there and he's jumping.
Okay, now for a late report, let's go down to Chris Economaki in the pit area.
Well, Bobby Wawak was injured in that accident. The doctors told me that if he had had fire retardant underwear on, gloves and fire retardant socks, and a balaclava, he would not be injured at all. As it is, he has serious burns over 15% of his body, and he's been taken to Halifax Hospital across the street from the Speedway. Back to you, Jim.
All right, Chris. Jackie, you have commented on a number of occasions that you have been worried about some of the NASCAR drivers because although the cars are as safe and safer than any race cars in the world, some of them are a bit negligent about wearing the fireproof underwear and that sort of thing.
The drivers themselves, I'm afraid, are negligent, and drivers should always wear flame-resistant underwear, thermal underwear. I used to wear 2 layers of it. I used to wear very special gloves that, in fact, only now are made in Italy and in England. They're very expensive, but they're the only things to wear. Your hands are very difficult to look after, even with the best plastic surgeons. We also wear protection round our face, and I'm afraid the accident we've seen today is just typical if you're not properly protected.
There are 38 laps left in the race. There is Benny Parsons, who is in 2nd place in the race. How far behind the leader, Cale Yarborough? Well, there you can see the difference right now. He has some space to make up, no question of that. But, of course, should a yellow flag come out, under NASCAR rules, you're allowed to close up. And when the green came out after the yellow, he would be right behind Cale Yarborough. And here comes Cale Yarborough down low. I thought for a moment he might be...
No, it was a sandwich there. He chose to go, and the yellow flag is out. The yellow flag has come out as Cale Yarborough passed, and there's the reason for the yellow flag.
Okay, we've got car number 81 back there. That's Terry Ryan of Davenport, Iowa, up against the wall on the backstretch.
It's coming out of turn 2, maybe this wind situation. Look at the wind blowing in the bushes behind there, and he may have been blown into that wall. He's hard up against the wall. The driver's all right, I'm sure.
Look at the equipment moving into place just that quickly. Tremendous safety situation here at Daytona. As we said, one of the very few things that could happen happened to Bobby Wawak. A sudden fire inside the driver's compartment of the car. They've still not figured out or reported, at any rate, exactly what was the cause of that.
Well, you can see there he's being attended to by the emergency crews. They've got, as you say, a very elaborate situation. They've got about 125 to 150 medical and emergency personnel around this racetrack. But he's okay.
Okay, they're under the yellow flag, and there are 36 laps to go at Daytona. The leaders are beginning to pit under the yellow flag here at Daytona. Kerry Yarborough, as you see, is still the leader in the race. Benny Parsons second. Buddy Baker. Cuckoo Marlin, who started well back, is in fourth place. And then Darrell Waltrip. We're going to get a report now from our New York studio where our old friend and colleague Frank Gifford is standing by. What's going on in sports today, Frank?
Thank you, Jim, and you're having quite a day down there. And for those of you who were not with us earlier, Kyle Rote successfully defended his men's Superstars title, winning a total of $35,350 in the process. Guy Drew and Dave Casper tied for second place, each winning $20,900. Drew's performance in the runoff for the obstacle course enabled him to gain that second place tie with Casper. And in college basketball, Purdue kept his flickering Big Ten hopes alive. They beat Indiana today 86-78. Gene Parker led a well-balanced scoring attack for Purdue with 18.6. Purdue players were in double figures. And in Atlantic Coast Conference play, 11th-ranked North Carolina withstood a wild second-half comeback by Virginia. They won that one 66-64. Phil Ford had 21 for North Carolina. Let's go back down to Daytona and Jim McKay.
There's been a lead change in the Daytona 500 under the yellow flag with all the leaders pitting. When they came out, Benny Parsons had a quicker pit stop than Kerry Yarborough and has taken the lead. Parsons the leader, Yarborough second, Buddy Baker third, Cuckoo Marlin fourth, Darrell Waltrip fifth. Still sitting on the race course is the car driven by Terry Ryan of Davenport, Iowa. Terry's still sitting in the car. No indication that he would be injured. They would have been out there to get him out, I think. I guess it's going to stay until they tow the car away. Safety, a big thing here at Daytona. Jackie did a very interesting piece on that. Why don't we look at it?
There can be no better car to show you the safety than King Richard Petty's. As I move along, I'm coming in front of a mesh effect. Now, this here is fireproof. The idea is to stop a driver's head or arms being thrown out in the case of the car rolling over. To get into the car, he has to put that down because he can't get in the doors. The doors are welded up just in case they fly open as well. The first thing you see, obviously, is this seat, which is certainly different from the normal car. It's padded to keep the driver in the seat against the high bank ovals at high speeds, the G's that he gets, holds him in, particularly in the shoulder side here. Of course, the driver wears seat belts like every driver on the road should nowadays. He's got two shoulder straps, he's got a waist strap, and then he's got one that slips through between his legs. The reason for that? To stop something called submarining, when a driver on heavy impact can slide underneath his own seat belt and sometimes even get decapitated. That has happened. This certainly would stop that. Steering wheel, it's padded in the case of impact as well. It's got fire extinguishers on board, although the fire hazard is certainly minimized in the NASCAR by the fact that the tanks are sealed outside the survival cell that we're looking at right now. It's underneath the car and shouldn't get in. If a fire does occur, however, we've got two fire extinguishers independently operated by the driver or by a rescue crew who could come. They just pull the pin and the fire extinguisher goes off. Now, the rollover cage is the most important factor of all, and this has probably saved more life than anyone else. You see all of this cage in here, heavily padded again to stop the driver from coming into contact with his arms or his crash helmet to stop severe impact. But that rollover cage has certainly saved more lives than anything else I can think of in any category of racing in the world. On the windscreen as well, we should have a little look at the windscreen because here there are struts on this windscreen to stop anything heavy coming in. It's mandatory to have 3, but Richard Petty, a man of safety, has 4, so that he's not going to have anything come in there. There's a lot in safety in NASCAR. It's the safest type of motor racing that I know, and I would rather be in this car in an accident than any other I know.
A look at the safety aspects of one of the racing NASCARs. There's the leader in the race. They're still under the yellow. And big day on ABC Sports. That's Benny Parsons, of course, in first place in the race. Do you know, Jackie, we will both be heard later this afternoon also. Wide World of Sports coming up at 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central, 5:30 Pacific. We're going to see the Chinese acrobats of Taiwan. They are really wild. The guy balances on top of a 30-foot tower of 8 chairs, and the guy drives nails through a board with his head, if you can believe that. That sort of thing. And I do the commentary on that. Then we're going to hear you from Samoritz, one of your fashionable watering places on your perennial tour, with the Cresta Run. That's fantastic. I haven't been there in a few years.
Well, it's a very exciting show, Jim. I hope everybody's going to stay on and watch Wide World of Sports today because it was a good show. The men slippering down the slippery slopes and their little machines. A great sport. I really enjoyed doing it.
Okay, and of course after Wide World, Glenn Campbell Los Angeles Open Golf Tournament, the final round of that. They're still under the yellow. You know, Two of the big men in this race are out of it, David Pearson and Richard Petty. And by the way, the Glen Count, that's all except on the West Coast. Boy, these time zones in our country are kind of tough. You know that, Jackie? Talking about Richard Petty and David Pearson, both out of the race today, but boy, they've been factors in this race in previous years. Last year, for example, it looked like it was all wrapped up. The two most experienced drivers in this race on the last lap when suddenly something happened. Bill Fleming and Jackie were here.
Everybody is standing here at the Daytona International Speedway. Look at David Pearson. He has moved closer. Can he do it?
He's going to pull out now. He's going to try for the top.
I don't know. He's down on the inside. He's got the lead, but there's a car ahead of him. There's a slower car ahead of him. And Richard Petty and Pearson go high. Pearson now has the lead. Petty tries to go back down on the inside as they come out of the fourth turn. They only have about 750 yards to go. Oh! It's a main straightaway. They did hit. Petty smashes into the wall. Will he come across the start-finish line? He's going to win the race. He's going to win it spinning, as he, I believe, will take the checkered flag. No, he did not make it. He is less than 100 yards from it. Here comes Pearson. Pearson is going to try to make it across the finish line. Petty has his car going. Pearson's going to win it. Oh, gosh, Randall, he wins the race.
Earlier this weekend, Chris Economaki asked those two drivers how they remembered the incident. They differed.
Well, the finish of it is not on my mind, Chris. Anytime that something like that happens, you always try to forget it. Although I did win the race, but I don't want to win another one that way anyway. You know, it's something that's in the past, and there's no need of looking back to, you know, see what was going on. I would say that, you know, probably both of those were a little at fault. I probably was more fault than he was, which I guess I was. But, you know, it was one of the things that happened in racing, and we really didn't mean for it to happen. And I think that if we knew that the circumstances would have come up, you know, like what it did, then I imagine we probably wouldn't have gotten that situation.
Okay, a look backward to last year's finish. Well, what lies ahead of us here? We really don't know, but it certainly could be a very close one, with Benny Parsons and Cale Yarborough very, very close to each other when they get the green. And it looks like they may get the green when they come around the next time. Yes, the flagman has it in his hand now, still furled, and he'll be dropping it for them when they're coming out of turn 4 there. So it is Cale Yarborough and Benny Parsons, the only two cars on the same lap. In third place, Cuckoo Marlin now, car number 14, then Buddy Baker and Darrell Waltrip.
Last night I had dinner with Benny Parsons, Jim, and he was saying that he didn't think that his car was quite fast enough to do it all on its own. He would have to sit behind another car and slingshot if he had any chance of winning the race at all. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in these laps as they come up to take the green. We think the pace car is thinking of coming off the racetrack. We're looking for the green flag. The pace car is coming on, and the green flag is given. They're under racing conditions once again.
Still, the skies are clear. It's warm, but it's still very windy.
Benny's taking a good lead under that green flag. He really did anticipate the flag a little bit, but he's got Cale Yarborough lurking in the background there. Cale won't let him go too fast.
This could make it very, very interesting because all through the race, as you commented, Cale's car has looked extremely fast, almost as if he could pull away at will. Right now, however, it looks like Benny Parsons has stolen the start from him a little bit when they put out the green, so Cale will have to go chase him. Benny Parsons once drove a taxi cab in the city of Detroit, Michigan. He's been in a lot of traffic again today.
Well, he certainly knows how to handle traffic. The man he's got to look at now is going to be filling his mirror in just about a second and a half's time, because I think you'll see Cale Yarborough really sticking it on the rear fender, the rear bumper of Benny Parsons' car as they come up to the dog leg underneath our commentary position. And there is Cale Yarborough trying to get through underneath Benny Parsons as they head towards turn 1, and I'm sure Cale Yarborough will have that. Going into turn 1, he has it. He's taking the lead.
Now it really begins. 29 laps left to go in this race around the 2.5-mile tri-oval of Daytona. The sun beginning to slant its rays off the roofs and the hoods of these racing cars. As Cale Yarborough has retaken the lead.
It's amazing that Cale Yarborough's had so much in hand all day long as far as straightforward speed is concerned. His car around the raceway seems to be very fast indeed because he's been happy with a leading position.
Benny Parsons is apparently in third place there, but of course he's in second place in the race. A.J. Foyt in between them is a couple of laps down. Chris Economaki has some kind of a report from Benny Parsons' pit. What's the story, Chris?
JC, elder, Benny Parsons, crew chief. What's Benny's problem now, J.C.?
Well, we got no problem, but I think Cale got us out geared. We pulled a 315, he's pulled a 322.
What does that mean, J.C.?
He can run faster than we can.
So what is Benny going to have to do?
He's going to have to draft him.
Okay, and it may set up one of those famous Daytona slingshot finishes. Back to you, Jim.
Oh, this could be very interesting indeed. But first of all, Benny Parsons has got to get into that draft. Right now, he is drafting on A.J. Foyt, who seems to be able to stay in the draft of Yarborough. A three-car draft at the moment, but
Yes.
he's dependent on Foyt staying in it.
That's right. A.J. Foyt is in the centre of that Sangley's there, but I think right now Benny Parsons will be quite happy to stay behind A.J. Foyt. There's no point in tangling and getting between them as long as Cale Yarborough doesn't get any distance ahead of him. As I say, the speed that Cale Yarborough has is obvious, and he's been in a position to stay in front without anyone being able to draft him to get through. Of course, when it comes to the final laps, and let's be absolutely sure about this, the final laps at Daytona have, in history, proved to be the most exciting of any races, so don't anyone switch to another channel.
I doubt that very much. Cale Yarborough with A.J. Foyt right behind, and then Benny Parsons. You know, we always have new people in the audience, Jackie, and I think it might be worthwhile for you to at least briefly explain what this drafting we talk about all afternoon is precisely, the physical nature of it.
Well, the car in front is breaking the air. It's cutting through the air. The car behind it, it's a little bit like a speedboat. You know, it's following in the wake of the wave, where there's no rough water, there's no rough air in the case of racing cars. And if that car behind tucks itself in, it means that it can take a run at the car in front, therefore come alongside and try to get past. It's a slingshot. It's as if he's running up on it, because there's a semi-vacuum in behind Cale Yarborough's car as we look at that. And there he's trying to draft him right now. A.J. Foyt's really close in, and that is what drafting is. It's taking advantage of the car in front, and it's Cale Yarborough you see right now that's doing that, breaking the air.
The draft goes on, the race goes on. 26 laps to go, and we're live at Daytona. With less than 24 laps left in the Daytona 500, which you're watching live, there are the standings. Cale Yarborough, Benny Parsons, then Buddy Baker 1 lap down. Cuckoo Marlin is 1 lap down. Darrell Waltrip in 5th place is 2 laps down. Dick Brooks in 6th place is 2 laps down. A.J. Foyt in 7th place is 3 laps down. As for the first woman to run in this race, Janet Guthrie is in 14th place at the moment, seems to be staying there.
As they went past there was a little puff of smoke came out of Benny Parsons' rear end of his car. I wasn't quite sure what that was there. We may look at it again as they enter turn 1. It was just as if he maybe had bottomed a little bit. There may be a bump on the racetrack. Maybe one of his tires are touching one of the wheel arches. Therefore, there's a little bit of tire smoke, but there was a puff of smoke. It could be engine. It could be nothing more important than a tire touching the bodywork. But Benny Parsons, not as high on the racetrack as Cale Yarborough. Cale Yarborough's car is really handling. He seems to be able to drive it almost anywhere he wants it. And this, for him, must be a very satisfying position to be in. However, Benny Parsons knows that the only way he can win the race is by slingshotting, and he's got a long time to think about how he can best do that. As long as he stays close to Cale Yarborough, he's going to be in a fairly comfortable position, Jim.
22 laps to go in the race, and as you see, A.J. Foyt is out of the picture now. It's just those 2 cars. Cale Yarborough watching the race course, and you can be sure in his rear-view mirror watching Benny Parsons. Cale Yarborough won the race 9 long years ago. Benny Parsons won it 2 years ago in a day that he says was, of course, the greatest moment of his racing life. And I think the interview that we saw earlier that he did with Chris Economaki was a very interesting one and a moving one. It was evident that even 2 years later, it's an emotional thing to Benny Parsons.
Yes, I think to win a major event, your first major event, is always a great thrill and something you'll never forget. I'll never forget the first time I won a Grand Prix. Likewise, when you win a super speedway such as this, for Benny Parsons, it was his breakthrough to the big time. And of course, one of the great things about Benny Parsons is he's been able to sustain that performance. He's got new sponsors now. He's a very mature racing driver. He presents himself well. He's a good race driver to have around.
Benny Parsons has won just 5 races in his NASCAR Grand National career, in a career going back to 1964. Last year, however, for the first time, he won 2 races and a total of $242,000. So It's been a slow climb to the top for Benny, but a very steady one, and a very satisfying one for him. Of course, right now, he's in second place behind Cale Yarborough. And I guess it seems like we say this sort of thing quite a bit, but I would say these are two of the pleasantest and most accommodating drivers in any branch of racing. Why don't we take a 5-second pause right now, Jackie, so that the stations around the country can identify themselves. Okay, we're back again at Daytona. The subject, the Daytona 500. The manner of coverage, live. Cale Yarborough leads by a couple of feet over Benny Parsons. They're the only ones at this moment with a chance of winning this race at this moment. Things change very quickly in NASCAR racing. We get an update on Janet Guthrie. My goodness, she's moved up to 10th place in the race. Mostly through the attrition of other cars which have retired, but all the same, she's still running, and this will be a most creditable finish if she goes all the way.
You've got to do well to be in the top 10 of any major race. And there is Janet Guthrie in car number 68, the green car. Green, of course, in NASCAR for a long while, as well as Indy, was a superstitious car. You weren't supposed to drive in a green car. Nowadays, that's been more or less thrown off. But
I think that was thrown off when Jack Brabham came over in a little rear-engine car and finished in the top 10 in the race and started the rear-engine revolution.
That's right. He came over to Indianapolis, did that. Jim Clark came over in a green car and did rather well as well. But these are red and orange cars and red, white, and blue cars you're seeing right now, and they're going pretty fast.
Okay, these are the leaders. Incidentally, Janet Guthrie has a very competitive car scheduled for Indianapolis this year, barring unforeseen events. She quite probably may make the starting field, unlike last year.
I'll be looking forward to going to Indianapolis, hopefully with you, Jim, of course, with ABC's coverage, and that's always a great event.
Okay, there are just 18 laps left in the Daytona 500. Why don't we take a commercial break right now so we don't miss anything? Benny Parsons is still dogging the tire tracks of Cale Yarborough. Yarborough the leader, Parsons second by a matter of feet. Buddy Baker 1 lap down, Cuckoo Marlin 1 lap down, and Darrell Waltrip 2 laps down in the standings. Those are the top 5 cars, but these are the 2 that matter, it appears. Certainly at this moment, with 15 laps left to go in the Daytona 500. Janet Guthrie, we would repeat, is in 10th position in the race. She started in 39th position out of the 42 starters. She's now 10th, and that, of course, is a very creditable showing. Chris Economaki took to talk to quite a number of the other drivers in the race about Janet. In a moment, we might hear what they had to say about her. Right now, however, there are the leaders once again. Things staying pretty much as they were, however. So let's take a look at some of the reactions to this girl, this woman, of other drivers.
Going about it, she's doing quite well, and I like Janet. You know, I've met her personally, and I've tried to help her from what little bit I can with a few pointers, and also with the setup of her car, and I hope she does well.
We was making some comments about it earlier when she qualified over 180 mile an hour. We said right then that, you know, that that was it. You know, any time that anybody can run 180 mile an hour here has got to do and be a pretty, you know, good driver. So I'm going to have to hand it all to her. She's doing a real good job here.
I think I'll be able to trust a whole lot better this year than we did last year, and I think that a whole lot that she sort of got to be one of the crowd now. We don't really pay that much attention to her, but you can bet most of them still know which car she's in.
No doubt. Speaking of Janet Guthrie, we're Bobby Allison, David Pearson, and Richard Petty. Janet Guthrie in 10th position. Chris is in the Guthrie pit right now. Chris?
I got Ralph Moody, Janet's crew chief. Our ladies in the top 10, Ralph, you please.
Oh, yeah, she's out there like all the rest, just trying how she can go, I guess.
You happy about it?
Oh, yeah, she's running right now at the end of the race about 178 and a half.
Okay, here's the car owner, Linda Ferrari. Linda, as a car owner, how much pressure you put on Janet to go fast?
I just say please a lot, and she's obviously responded beautifully.
Well, she just moved into the top 10. Are you pushing her to go further along, or do you want to hold there?
Top 10 is what we've been dying for 6 races. This is it.
Okay, Linda Ferrari, back to you, Jim.
Okay, a live report from the pits of Janet Guthrie running 10th in her first Daytona 500, the first Daytona 500 in which any woman driver has ever been. Cale Yarborough, the leader of the race, still being followed by Benny Parsons. The problem for Cale is to try to break that draft. If he once does it, he should breeze home to victory. If he doesn't, well, coming out of turn 4 on the final lap, Benny Parsons, whose car he feels is slower than Cale Yarborough, just might be able to do that slingshot. Darrell Waltrip down low. He's been running in 5th place in the race, but now it looks like he's headed for the pits under the green flag, and that'll cost him. Paper's still blowing around.
He slowed down the back stretch there. He slowed down very quickly, so he must have some sort of trouble. There's Benny Parsons sticking his nose out of the slipstream there of Cale Yarborough out of the draft, just to have a little look and see what's been happening. You know, he's sitting behind there. There's a lot of dust, a lot of sand being blown up on that windscreen. The windscreen, when it's finished this race, Jim, will look like as if it's been sandblasted. It'll certainly not be used in any other kind of event. So they'll have to change these windshields today because of the wind, because of the dust that's been blown onto them. So it's really not too easy to sit behind there. There's a lot of muck being thrown back, and it's uncomfortable.
When they get to the start-finish line in just a moment, there will be 10 laps left to go in the race. Would Benny be kind of rehearsing that move a little bit when he's moving out, having a look?
For sure he's rehearsing it. There's one thing certain. I've never seen a Daytona 500 being won from turn 4. I think he has to go out of the straight in that position, but we'll be coming back to see what happens in the last 10 laps in just a moment.
9 laps to go in the Daytona 500. Cale Yarborough leading by a narrow margin over Benny Parsons. Big show coming up on March 6th on ABC. We'll have the 3rd quarterfinal round of the U.S. Boxing Championships. Many promising young boxers going for American titles in all weight classes. This time it'll be from the Marion Correctional Institute in Marion, Ohio. And of course, Howard Cosell will be there with George Foreman as the expert commentator. That's Sunday, March 6th, quarterfinal round, U.S. Boxing Championships. Now there are 8 laps to go in the Daytona 500, and we're nearing that moment of truth.
Just before we went into our commercial there, Jim, I was explaining, and I think that this is the way it will work at the end of this race. I'm sure Benny Parsons will try to make his pass going down the back stretch, going in to turn 3 as he's going into turn 3 now.
Why would he do that rather than out of turn 4?
Because coming out of turn 4, Jimmy, there's a bit of a bump in there, and unless he's in the right part of the racetrack, you could fix yourself up into the same sort of situation right there where they are at this moment as Richard Petty and David Pearson had last year in the Daytona 500, where they crashed on the very last corner of the last lap. I think Benny Parsons, being the conservative driver that he is, would try to make that pass going into turn 4, try and keep the lead, and I would find it very difficult to believe that Cale Yarborough could get past him if Parsons uses the road properly. And I mean that he uses his elbows and his shoulders just that little bit to be on the piece of road that Cale Yarborough would want to be on to get past before the dog leg and the finishing line. However, of course, Cale Yarborough is going to be well ahead of that game too. It's going to be a psychological match over these last 7 laps.
A cat and mouse game at 185 miles an hour. That's what it'll be. The 2 leaders staying right there. Yarborough in the lead. Parsons in the draft. By the way, our production and engineering crews do a pretty good job themselves today, I think, when you consider the fact that we've lost several cameras due to weather conditions, not technical reasons. The Goodyear blimp, for example, has been grounded because of the high winds, and so is our camera that would have been dangling from a 100-foot crane outside turn 2.
Well, we haven't missed any of the action. There's been a lot of action here at Daytona. The action's certainly going to come close to the end, and we're going to have a very close finish whatever way. And the 2 men that are going to give us that, car number 11, Cale Yarborough, getting down this long backstretch now, closely followed in the draft by Benny Parsons, sitting there in his red, white, blue car. Again, Yarborough higher in the banking than Parsons.
Less than 6 laps to go in the Daytona 500. Yarborough and Parsons, as if they were connected with a tow rope. Well, there is an invisible tow rope. Benny Parsons, what he must be thinking right now. I'd like to hear again the answers he gave to Chris Economaki when Chris asked him this weekend to think back to 1975 when he won this race before. This is what it meant to him then and today.
Well, that's very hard to talk about that, Chris, because it was the highlight of my racing life, my racing career, and I've been doing it for a long, long time, and I guess there's been times during this period that I said, well, did I pick the right profession? Am I truly a race driver? Do I deserve to be? But you have days like that, pulling Victory Circle at Daytona Beach and the Daytona 500. you know that you made the right decision a long, long time ago.
Benny Parsons. And this could be the second greatest moment of his racing career if he can slingshot on Cale Yarborough on the final lap. There are less than 4 laps to go in the race. It's late afternoon as you watch live from Daytona in Florida. We'll be right back. Cale Yarborough may have just achieved what he's been trying to do. He may have broken the draft on Benny Parsons as they were moving past a slower car in traffic. However, it's kind of on the borderline for the draft. What do you think?
I think Benny Parsons is slightly in trouble. If Cale Yarborough does not make a mistake, it might be difficult for him to catch up. Cale Yarborough right now is far enough ahead that the draft is just marginal, as you say. There's only 2 laps to go, and Benny Parsons is too far back for my liking. If I were in Benny Parsons' seat right now, I would be worried. I would really be hanging on by the skin of my teeth. I would be trying to bring that race car around there without scrubbing off any speed, without losing the slightest bit of adhesion, just in case I was going to slow myself down. I'd almost be tucking my head inside the cockpit to try and avoid the wind resistance, Jim, even though we're in a sedan car.
All right, the only 2 cars on the same lap, remember. Yarborough and Parsons. In 3rd place is Buddy Baker, 1 lap down. Cuckoo Marlin in 4th place, 2 laps down. And Dick Brooks in 5th place, 2 laps down. Coming for the white flag, which means 1 lap to go. It's being held furled, and now it's out. There it is. 1 lap to go, and it certainly doesn't look as if Benny Parsons is close enough, unless he's got some extra RPMs he hasn't used.
He can't do it. He can't do it. I don't believe he can do it. Unless something happens to Cale Yarborough, I don't believe there's any opportunity for him to get there at all. There's the relationship. You can see it's wide open there. It's, of course, just fractions of seconds in a way, but it's too far on the racetrack. This is a big racetrack to cover, but I'm afraid they can't do it. It's 2.5 miles long, but they're now going into turn 3. He's already in it. Cale Yarborough is high in the banking there. There's no way that Benny Parsons can catch him now.
Well, what a beginning for the year 1977 it'll be for William Caleb Yarborough of Timmonsville, South Carolina. He won the NASCAR season-long championship last year, and now he wins the Daytona 500 at age 37 for the 2nd time, 9 years after his initial victory here.
Well, he drove a masterful race. He drove a well-judged finish there with the last 2 or 3 laps to go. He saw his opportunity, he took it, and he found himself in the lead. It'll be interesting to see if Benny Parsons has a reason for not being able to keep in there, whether his car had a little hiccup or not, but he certainly lost ground.
Well, it seemed to be when they were passing a slower car, a car that had no significance in the race, that somehow Cale got by him, and as he would back up again, possibly that other car blocked the draft from Benny Parsons.
There they are going along the racetrack. Benny Parsons is drawn alongside Cale Yarborough to acknowledge his victory. I'm sure they're just having a little wave to each other. Janet Guthrie, by the way, has finished in 9th position, Jim. A very creditable effort for the young lady indeed. 9th position in the top 10 in any big race is a big thing.
Cale Yarborough on his way to Victory Lane before more than 100,000 people on a warm, windy day in Daytona.
Well, it's been 9 years since Cale Yarborough experienced this sensation. Victory Lane at Daytona Beach, and they can't even wait to get him out of the car before the congratulations begin. He is a happy, happy man. He's had a great year in 1976, and now in 1977 he's started off in a big way. He's making sure that he looks right. He's being bombarded from both sides by well-wishers. We're going to get around and get a word with him here. Here's the Daytona 500 winner. Right. Hey, congratulations, Cale.
It was a good day, Chris. It's been a good week, Chris. We took everything they threw at us. We won all 3 of them.
You remember 9 years ago?
I sure do. It's even sweeter now. Even sweeter now than it was then.
Yeah, well, let him get a drink here. Take your time, Cale. We got... Here's Betty Jo. You happy, honey?
I certainly am. I predicted this the other day. He worked awfully hard for us.
Saying any prayers?
We certainly did. We walked back and forth and said.
Still do thank the good Lord for a good safe race too, Chris. It was a good one all day.
Well, it certainly was. Cale, a couple of laps at the end there, you broke away from Benny. Was that something you did or problems he had?
No, well, Benny, right at the end, Chris, I picked up a car or 2 on him, and I got to cut back and lost him, shook him off. Just the traffic helped me break away from him, so that did it. This Holly Farm Chevrolet ran like a scalded chicken all day, though.
What was going through your mind the last 5 laps, Cale?
Well, All I can say, you know, Lord, just let it hold together.
And I saw your daughter over here. Is she around?
Where's Julie?
She. Come on up here, Julie. Your whole Yarborough family is here. It's a great family. They've done a lot for racing in the United States. Come on up, honey. Which Yarborough? And who's this, Cal? This is not your daughter. It's your mother. Hi, Mrs. Yarborough.
The happiest day of my life, other than when he was born and they said it's a boy.
There's no place in an auto race like Victory Lane. Okay, from Victory Lane, back to you, Jim.
All right, Chris. 17 years ago, Junior Johnson won the second Daytona 500 ever run. He's the owner of the car that was driven by Carol Yarborough to victory today. We're going to try to have a word with Janet Guthrie. We're back again at Daytona. Let's run down the top 10 as Chris Economaki tries to get a word with Janet Guthrie, and the brush fire continues to burn about 1.5 miles back of turn 3. Cale Yarborough, of course, won the race. Benny Parsons was second. Buddy Baker was third. Cuckoo Marlin was fourth. Dick Brooks was fifth. A.J. Foyt was sixth. Darrell Waltrip was seventh. Frank Warren was eighth, and Janet Guthrie, remember, finished in ninth position as the first woman ever to drive in the Daytona 500. Rounding out the top 10 was James Hilton. The average speed was very low because of the many yellow flags we had, 153.218 miles per hour. Daytona 500, one of the sports classics of the United States. How it has grown since we first came here back in the very early 1960s. The first one was run in 1959, and the winner was Lee Petty, the father of Richard Petty, who in the years since then has won it 5 times himself. All the great names in this sport want to get on the board as a winner at the Daytona 500, and most of them have. Lee Petty and Junior Johnson, Marvin Panch, and the great Fireball Roberts, who was the biggest name in the sport when we first started covering it, Jackie, and the late Tiny Lund. Richard Petty 5 times, Freddie Lorenzen, Pete Hamilton won it. A.J. Foyt won it back in 1972, and so did Mario Andretti in 1967, the two interlopers from the USAC circuit.
Well, they come down from time to time, and as we look from our commentary position now, I see Janet Guthrie running up pit lane. She's just passing the start-finishing line now to try and go and speak to Chris Economaki.
As Carol Yarborough embraces his wife yet again. A lot of male and female situations going on here at Daytona. Remember, Jackie, when we first started doing Indy together even, you'd never see a woman in the pit area.
No, it wasn't allowed. I'm glad to see that's been greatly changed these days. I think this is the Yarborough family we're seeing now. I recognize a Yarborough there on the right-hand side of your screen. 2 daughters, I should think, there, with a very happy papa.
Couldn't be happier. At age 37.
Well, that's wife and daughter, in fact. I'm sure mother will be happy to hear that. But there's wife in the middle there, and daughter in the red and the yellow there, on the right of our picture.
Coming up on most of these ABC stations, we have Wide World of Sports. Jackie Stewart's going to be at the Questa Run in Samoritz, Switzerland. And I'm going to be checking in with the acrobats, the Chinese acrobats of Taiwan. It's a very varied, very different wide world today, a very wide world kind of show. Unusual events. And then, except on the West Coast, you'll be seeing the Glenn Campbell Los Angeles Open Golf Tournament, final round of that. Young Tom Purcher had a good lead going into the final round. But he's being chased, I'm sure. We've had very good help in the booth today from Jay Milligan, our executive spotter, and from an old friend and former colleague at ABC, Dick Kirchner, who's been helping us out in about 100 different ways. Jackie Stewart here, of course, will be leaving very soon. And all of us will. However, as we wait for Janet Guthrie still, waiting for the lady, let's check in with Frank Gifford in New York.
Open. We do have some basketball scores. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar scored 35 points as the Lakers strengthened their grip on first place in the NBA's Pacific Division with a 108-101 victory over Washington. And in a local battle here in New York, the New York Knicks got 22 points from Bob McAdoo to beat the Nets 100-80. In a dramatic finish, the Philadelphia 76ers came from 22 points back in the final period to beat Cleveland 112-111. Julius Erving with 34 points, the architect of that comeback. Okay, back to Daytona and Chris Economaki.
Janet, a 500-mile drive and a 200-yard run up to meet us. Thank you so much. Comment on your day.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I wish the engine had run till the end. We lost the motor 10 laps before the end, but gee, it was good while it lasted. The car handled beautifully.
You finished 9th, you know.
Oh, I didn't know that. Is that true? That's wonderful. I'm glad to hear it. Well, that's my first top 10 for the year.
Well, that's great. Any scares during your visit during your ride?
Yeah, I tell you, I saw a couple of squirrels out there. I'd like an apology for some of the guys that threw rocks at me. I'll tell you that.
Well, now you're calling the shot, Janet. Congratulations. Janet Guthrie, 9th place finish in today's Daytona 500. And back to you, Jim.
Janet, of course, was talking about verbal rocks that some of the guys threw at her, not something that anybody threw at her from the grandstand. Well, that's about the story from here. Jim McKay with Jackie Stewart and Chrissy Kanamaki, the executive producer of ABC, leader in sports television.